Like Houston, hey, feeling like Whitney. I need a bag, bruh. Send it through quickly. I'm making his dog like I'm in the big leagues. Told him that I gotta go, dog. I'm riding the road, y'all. I think that I'm back in my bag now.
Welcome, football fans, USFL fans, but most importantly, Houston Gamblers fans, to another episode of Gamblers Table Talk with Ace. I'm Ace, and joining me today is the general manager of the Houston Gamblers, Robert Morris. Coach, how you doing?
Good, Ace. Hey, can I ask you, who was that football player in your intro? Because we may have a spot ready on our roster. Who was that?
Thank you, Coach. I know I checked. You're at 58 right now. So
Okay.
I heard that's the magic number.
We'll have to pass on it. That's too bad. You look good, though.
I heard he's got a good arm for his height. But
okay.
But thank you, Coach. I really appreciate you coming on. It's been a very, just crazy offseason for the USFL. We haven't really seen off seasons for spring football other than like the CFL. So the fact that we had a team change, we had all the coaching changes, we had a draft, it's been just really interesting to watch and see because it's kind of all new. So since I first talked to you, which was back on my Twitter space, which I think now you can only listen to on Spotify, you have signed so many players since then. We had the draft, you have a new head coach, and I figure we just talk about those things and get your side of it and how you attacked each situation.
Okay.
Yes, sir. So let's start with the most recent, the draft.
Okay.
What was that process like?
It was an interesting process in that, if you figure an NFL team has 12 scouts to watch the 2023 class all year and then has the All-Star games to watch them, and then they're going to have the combine, pro days, and a lot of other things before they make their decision. Each of our teams had one person, some help from the coaching staffs. There wasn't a whole lot of time spent in the fall watching college film because we were signing our own free agents to fill up our rosters from guys that had left. And so, really starting in January with the All-Star games, that's when my preparation started. And figuring that there were, 3,000 players in this draft class, I had to somehow find a way to limit that number. And so I told myself, I'm going to draft players, or I'm going to work on a pool of players that I see in person. So I went to the CGS All-Star game, I went to the Hula Bowl, and I went to the NFLPA game, because over the 3 years of doing the spring leagues, a bulk of our players have attended those All-Star games. The players in the East-West game usually get a pretty good opportunity in the NFL, and they come to us on the rebound of their NFL career. Senior Bowl, Combine guys, those are pretty high-end NFL players, and they usually come to spring leagues when their NFL career is over. So we wanted to get a pool of players that were right on the cusp of making the NFL, good enough to play in the NFL, and when the NFL didn't have room for them, then they would be good players at our level. And as I drafted these players and I texted them, I made sure that I told them that we drafted you because we saw a good football player. We didn't draft you because we didn't see a guy that we didn't think could play in the NFL. It was just the opposite of that. We drafted you because you're an NFL player, because that's what we want on our team. You have a pro day to go to. You'll have the NFL draft, maybe sign as a free agent, maybe get in a rookie mini camp. More than likely and hopefully get to go to an NFL training camp, participate in the training camp, make a practice squad. Just keep going. And when the process is over for you and the NFL says that they don't have room for you, then we have told you that we see something in you that tells us you're a good football player, and we would like to have you a part of our football team. And so in looking at the players at the CGS, the Hula Bowl, and the NFLPA game, and Andy was at the Hula Bowl, and so he concentrated on the offensive line. And then when I was at the NFLPA game, I sent him offensive linemen from the NFLPA game. So Andy was a big help with the offensive line. from that group of players, we got it down to about 40 guys. And it was guys that we could easily see something that we liked. And like I told Andy, I said, we shouldn't have to look hard to try and see if this guy is good enough. He ought to show up on the practice field. And one thing that I did, and you can take two different approaches to it. I didn't want to be anchored by what I had seen on film. So I basically knew nothing of these guys going into the games. Maybe I had seen some of them on TV. Maybe I knew a little bit about some of them. But for the most part, I was going in blind and trusting my scouting eye to see something I liked and then go back it up with the film. So that was my process. Take, for example, Justin Ford. Watching the defensive backs at the Hula Bowl, he was someone that just stood out by the way he moved on the field, by his body, his stature, his height, ball catching skills, ball skills. And so I wrote his name down and then got back to the hotel while the game was going on and watched some film. And sure enough, he's a good player, productive player, a lot of interceptions, returns for touchdowns. He's just a good player. So I put him on my list as a guy that, I was going to continue to follow. Chase Bryce. Funny story. I don't know where I was, but I was watching the App State North Carolina game, and I
That
saw
game
that,
was wild.
and I told myself and our then head coach, who's no longer with us, that that's going to be our first draft choice. I liked the way he played. He reminded me of quarterbacks in spring leagues that had been successful, and I just, he had the athletic instincts to move around, make plays. And I liked him from that game. And then again at the Hula Bowl, I thought, he was one of the better quarterbacks there. And then he went on to the East-West game and played there. So, I kind of had my eye on him the whole time. And then you take Joey Fisher. Joey was easy. And he was one of the most dominant linemen at the NFLPA game. He's a small college guy going against SEC conference defensive ends and blocking them. And I sent him to Andy, and Andy said, "Holy cow, who is Joey Fisher?" So he had him at the top of his list too. After he saw the film and went back and watched his film. And so that was the process. You watch practice, you target guys that you see something in, go back to the hotel, watch film. You either like it or you don't. Maybe the film didn't back up a couple guys I like, so I moved on. And then same thing with the NFLPA game. Go to the NFL.
All right. Everybody may notice that I'm not in different clothes, but Coach Bob is in different clothes right now. We had some technical difficulties and we're picking it up the next day. So, Coach, we were talking about the not the USFL, the NFLPA Bowl, and you were about to talk about Scott Matlock.
Yep. Again, I went to the bowl games trying to look for players to impress me. I went there with no prior knowledge, and one guy that definitely caught my eye was Scott Matlock from Boise State. He was dominant in drills, played well in the game. He was a guy you couldn't take your eyes off of. And so then you watch the film, and he's just as dominant at Boise State. And so he was another guy that I had my eye on. Now he's probably, of all the guys we drafted, maybe the most highly thought of by the NFL, just from what I could gather. But he was too good to pass up. And we have some defensive linemen that are untested, and so we wanted to make sure that we beefed up that position. Jeff Johnson, another kid that had a great career at Tulane and then transferred to Oklahoma his last year, was at the Hula Bowl and the NFLPA game and did a good job in both games. Now, not the enforcer and the penetrator and disruptor that Matlock was, but just a steady force inside, more of a zero cheat, 2-eye type of guy. But we added 2 interior defensive linemen. And another strategy that we went into this with was to try and target positions that are hard to find on the street in the middle of the fall as you're getting ready to add to your team. Those positions being offensive line, defensive line, and cornerback. So we took 2 offensive linemen, we took 2 defensive linemen, and we took 2 corners. Uh, it's and I can measure that on the number of calls I get from agents about free agents, about running backs, about wideouts. I get a lot of those. Safeties, very few corners, and if they are, they're undersized and maybe not the type of guy we're looking for. Same with defensive linemen. Same with offensive linemen. So if you're going to get a quality player at that position, you're going to have to use some draft capital to do that. And we felt very good doing that as we approached, this first ever NFL 2023 draft. So those were the highlighted guys. We ended up taking Keenan Isaac from Alabama State, our second corner. Again, a tall, long corner, an HBCU player from Alabama State. Brandon Barnes actually gave me his name as a guy to look at, and so I made sure that I looked at him, and so he was the second corner we added, and then we added 2 coaches to our coaching staff this year from the University of Colorado, and I'm a Colorado grad, and I had known about Brady Russell just from watching Colorado games over the last 4 years. And so when I saw Brady at the NFLPA game, it was just kind of a natural, okay, let's see what he's like. And in that game, he was everything he was at Colorado, just a hard nose, get after it, do everything, fullback, H-back, tight end, catches a ball well, probably a better athlete than he gets credit for. And when we got down later in the draft, although we have 4 tight ends on our roster, and talking to our new coaching staff, Brady was a guy that kind of fit their mold of what they're looking for, a guy that can be a fullback, guy that can be an H-back, do multiple things, great special teams player. So that was a good add for us late in the draft. And then, we added Jason Taylor from Oklahoma State at safety. Again, a guy that was a dominant player at the NFLPA game. I mean, he was making plays from sideline to sideline in cover 2, come up and making plays on the ball. And then you watch his Oklahoma State game, and he just reminded me of the safeties that I'd like to coach, of safeties that I've scouted in the range that they show. And so when he was sitting there in the 9th round, and again, I know he'll be in an NFL camp, and he's got the stuff to make it and stick. He's 5'11", 7'2", 208. So he's on the shorter side of the height and weight that NFL teams are looking for, but he's got a lot of make it qualities. But when the NFL says they don't want him anymore, we'll gladly take him. And then the pick number 10, maybe one of my favorite picks, Colby Reeder. Colby was a very productive player at Delaware, and then transferred to Iowa State for his last year. And at the Hula Bowl, he was just all over the place. I mean, if you're watching the whole field, he was running around making plays all over the place. And so put his name down, watch the Iowa State film, same thing. Watch the Delaware film. I mean, he's a highlight reel for ever and ever and ever, just making plays. And again, being in spring leagues for 3 years, Colby may not have everything it takes to make an NFL roster, but he's got everything it takes to be a very productive player in a spring league in the USFL for the Houston Gamblers. And, I like to look for productive players. I like to look for players that look good on the field, moving around. And I think these 10 guys are those type of players. I think they're all going to get a really hard look from the NFL because, like I told them, I wouldn't have drafted them if I didn't think they had some qualities that the NFL liked, because I was a scout for 16 years in the NFL, and I know what they're looking for, and those same qualities are what I'm looking for as I build our team. So somewhere down the road, I don't know if any of these guys will help us this year. We'll just have to see, what the NFL thinks about them as we move through the pro days and the mini camps and all those things. But when they do come and join us, they'll make our team better, and that was the goal.
I absolutely agree. I think you had a good balance of, NFL qualities and probability at the USFL. I wrote an article actually grading each pick on that. I was probably a little hard on him, but I didn't want to look too biased. I do love this team. But I like that you said Colby Reeder was your favorite. And I agree with that. He has those Donald Payne qualities where maybe he's not the fastest guy on the field or the biggest, but he just has a nose for the ball. He's going to be there. I specifically love Justin Ford. That was my favorite. When we started doing mock drafts back when we didn't know what the draft would look like, he was on all of our mock drafts. He was just the shutdown corner of FCS football. And then I do love that you got Jason Taylor. I'm a Baylor guy. I watch a lot of Big 12 football. And Jason Taylor and Colby Reeder, I remembered them. Jason Taylor, little short, but he has long arms, so he makes up for it. And he's just, like you said, he can cover sideline to sideline and cover two. So I think you did a fantastic job, Coach.
Well,
and it's very, you're welcome. And it's very interesting to see the different ways. Like our Maulers representative, he had an interview drop today with Jaron Horton, who handled a lot of the drafting for the Maulers. They went after many more small school guys and guys that they thought they could get this year. Whereas it almost felt like you were more comfortable with your roster and you were saying, who can I get that will help, the pipeline down the road and keep us where we are. So it's just very interesting, at least for me, to see the different ways that different GMs and coaches attacked it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no, I am comfortable with our roster, and I also wanted to feel that if any of these players joined us, they would make our roster better. I just didn't want to draft a guy just to draft a guy. And if he comes in, I have to cut a guy that maybe is not as good as him. That's not a good way to draft. You always want to draft better and force me then to make a decision, on who makes our team better. And I think these guys will, and time will tell. So I wish them all the best. I hope they have a long NFL career, because then that shows that I know what I'm doing. And, when they're ready to play in the spring league, we'll take them.
That's a great way to look at it. Like, if they don't come into the USFL because they stick, then yeah, you scouted great players. Yeah. But I do love that you're wearing your CU Boulder shirt.
Yes.
2 coaches on the CU from last year with CU are on the Gamblers now. And I knew when I was watching the draft, when I was checking my phone, I was just waiting for a Colorado Buffalo player to show up. And it did. And he's a great one. He reminds me a lot of a Clint Sig, of Julian Allen, kind of an H-back tight end, better hands than you'd think by looking at him. It was a fantastic pick.
Well, when Montez was his quarterback, he had an exceptional year. He was their leading receiver, I think, as a sophomore. And then, they didn't have the quarterback play the last couple of years, and so his receptions were down. Doesn't mean he regressed as a player. He just didn't have the quarterback to get in the ball or the wide receivers on the outside to free up the middle. So he's a good player.
I like it. And I also like that I could see kind of a shift because, I don't know if anybody was watching the Gamblers free agency as much as I was, but it's interesting to see your strategy then when you were signing players when there wasn't even basically no defensive coaching staff, compared to now when most of the coaching staff is nailed down and you went into the draft with specific schemes in mind, at least for a few of them. I thought it was very interesting to see that shift as well. And speaking of the free agency, I thought that we could talk about a couple.
Just one thing.
Yes, sir.
When this draft was like a week after the new coaching staff was hired, probably about less than a week after Curtis Johnson was hired.
Oh, yeah.
But what I did do is as I went to these games and I targeted the players that I thought would help us, I sent the defensive film to Chris Wilson. I sent the defensive back film to Brett Maxey. I sent the offensive film to Eric and to Andy. Well, Andy did the offensive lineman, so and he helped me with the draft. So I did get their perspective on would this guy help us, and then that helped me make the decisions that we made going into the draft.
That's the kind of insider info, background knowledge that we don't have because we're just watching the draft as the picks come out on Twitter and Instagram. That is really cool. I didn't know that you were sending them that stuff because I'm sure Chris Wilson's still in Colorado right now, and I don't even know where Brett Maxey's from, but they're not in the state of Texas and as close to you as Andy is. So I like that. That is cool. Yeah. And sounds like just a very fun process. I tell everybody, every coach who's come on, I've let them know Bob Morris has my dream job. So it just sounds super fun.
Yeah.
But like I said, free
Try to make it
agency,
fun. Yep.
you make it look real fun, coach. But free agency, that was very interesting because it was watching you where a lot of things were up in the air, and you told me, you said, I am getting the best available and I'm looking for people who can fill many roles. And I thought that that was very apparent, especially in defensive backs. Now I know you lean toward defense and especially defensive backs, but I like the way that every single one of them, it was not just this guy's a straight up corner, this guy's a straight up safety. It was this guy's a returner, nickel, corner. This guy's a safety, nickel, returner. They just fill many different roles. They can fall into those roles, especially a guy, Donald Rutledge, out of Georgia Southern, who was just in the CFL Grey Cup. I thought that one was incredibly interesting because not only was he a safety nickel, but he can come off the edge or play some outside linebacker. What did you see about him that made you think this guy's a gambler?
I just saw a really good football player.
There you go.
You watch he started his career as a corner at Savannah State, and that was really good film. Then he went to Georgia Southern as a safety. That was really good film. And then I
Yes.
think at the Citadel, he played kind of like that hybrid 4-4 nickel type guy. And he did that really well. Um, and then he ends up going to Canada, and you watch the Canadian film, and he plays as a nickel back, outside the tight end in that flat area. He plays as a safety coming down or playing right over the tight end, coming down into the flat. Then he lines up in the box and makes plays from there because they have 12 guys on the field. And I think he said his position was rover or something like that. And so
Interesting.
you saw him make plays from various positions on the field uh, and do it all effortlessly, knowing that when he was playing corner, he was a really good corner before he probably added 10, 15 pounds. So he's a player that now the coaching staff can use however they see fit. Whether it's as I think naturally it's a strong safety, that can come down in the box. If they go to nickel, he could do that, or he could play strong, or he could be the dime linebacker. Uh, he's just one of those guys in this league that's very valuable because you have a limited number of players, and so you need players that can fill a bunch of different roles. And it was the same with the safety. If we had a if we had an issue last year at linebacker and safety, is we weren't fast enough at times, especially with our
Mhm.
backups or for special teams. And not that the guys that were in there didn't do a good job, they did, but I just felt as a team, we lacked some team speed at those spots. So, again, not knowing who our defensive staff was going to be, I just tried to fill those roles with as many good players that had legitimate speed that I could. Uh, Claiborne and Grant are like twins. They started their career at corner and then they moved to safety, went back to
Mhm.
corner when there was an injury and could do that. And it's always good in this type of football that everything is spread out to have safeties that can play man coverage because the offense, especially the offensive coaches in our league, which I'm kind of partial, but after watching 2 weeks of the XFL, I think our offensive coaches do a bang up job of creating mismatches by formations. Mike Riley, I was with Mike for a year, so I know what he can do. Skip Holtz, you name it. They're all good at what they do. And
Mhm.
so we need safeties that can play man coverage because those guys are going to find a way to get that. And so adding those guys at safety was that way. And then the same at linebacker. I mean, we got completely wiped out at linebacker,
Yes.
either by the NFL or by the XFL, and really good players. And then I signed a young man, Story Jackson, who is a really good player,
Very
and
good.
he ends up signing with the Bears on their practice squad after he had committed to us. And so he ends up, just like Mike Abernathy or the other guys, he's on an NFL team now. Will have his rights when he's finished with the NFL, which may not be for a while now, uh, because he's a really good player. But so he was a guy that I had signed that I thought was going to join us, and then 10th week of the season he signs with Chicago and then signs the futures with them. And so adding again linebackers that can fit in any system because I didn't know what we were going to run. So getting some Mike linebacker types, and then getting some will linebackers, whether it's in a 3-4 or whether it's in a 4-3, guys that can run. Uh,
Mhm.
that was important too. And, I think we did that. Brandon Payer was in our draft a year ago, and he was right below the level that we took guys at. And he was one of the very first players I signed once I knew we had
Mhm.
lost all of our linebackers. And he is a run and hit linebacker, and he just runs all over the field and makes plays as long as he's covered up. I mean, he will run and hit you. And Tolson is kind of the same way. He's a guy at Illinois that he'll line up in space, make plays out there, and then come in the box and fill downhill and runs 4.51. Uh, so we filled that. And I just like the whole group. I apologize for having to look at my notes, but Jordan Young
Oh,
from Old Dominion,
I have notes
another
too, coach. No worries.
another guy that is just a good, basically in the box linebacker that just makes plays all over the place, a good size, and then the last spot that we actually filled on our roster was Isaiah Pryor. And Isaiah is a four-star athlete out of high school that actually played safety at IMG,
Mhm.
big safety. And when he got to Ohio State and then through his time at Notre Dame, he was basically playing like a will linebacker in space. Uh, and then again, you see him running around making plays, and excellent special teams players all 4 years in college. And again, on all of these guys, once the new coaching staff was hired, I would shoot the film to them. I shot Isaiah's film to Chris. Chris looked at it, liked it, liked the ability to run and make plays and do all that. Thought he was a good fit. So I like the I like the four linebackers, and I think we have maybe not the experience that we had a year ago, because we had some guys that had been in the NFL for a couple of years, had played spring league for a couple of years. Uh, but I like their athletic ability as a whole, and Chris will coach them up, and they'll fill that position pretty well, I think.
Yeah, one of the things I was looking at it the other day before I did a pre-camp roster breakdown, and that's the one position where there's no returners whatsoever. And it was interesting to me, but then I remembered, okay, but we do have Chris Wilson. I say we, I'm not a part of it, but Chris Wilson, who played linebacker in college and won a Super Bowl coaching defensive line. He's a veteran of the game. He understands defense. He's going to coach the defense and help with linebackers. We're good. Because before that, it was Jeff Smart. I didn't really know much about him. I knew, about his time at Colorado. Now he moved on. And it just feels a little bit better with the lack of experience at a professional level to Chris Wilson. And I think that's just a match made in heaven. And you got a lot of speed there. Kalen Tolson, he's incredibly fast for his size. It doesn't make a lot of sense, but great pickup there.
Yeah,
And a very, very, very nice gentleman. I
right.
had the honor of talking to him.
And three of
But
those guys, everybody but Brandon was in an NFL camp this fall,
mhm.
and we're cut on the last cut down date, so they have traits that the NFL likes,
Mhm.
and we'll put those traits to good use, with the gamblers.
Well, I was talking to Brandon Beck right after camp. He was spending his time making sure he was putting in physical work, building a basement for his friend. So he's been keeping at it. So no worries
Yeah,
about that. But then moving over to the offensive side, some players that I found interesting was first Justin Hall, wide receiver out of Ball State. And you specifically mentioned that he is a pretty much slot receiver. And then that was a position the Gamblers did not have last season. There was no specific slot receiver on the roster.
yeah. I think if you again, this is criticisms on me putting together the team last year. Is we did a good job of getting speed at our wide receiver spot, but
Mhm.
we didn't have a lot of uh, versatility or I can't
Elusiveness?
I can't think of no can't think of the right word. We had the same type of athlete at every position. Uh,
Mm.
we didn't have a tall guy down the field. We didn't have a little slot receiver, that could, do the things that slot receivers in the NFL do. Uh, you know, Polka played in there for us. Anthony played in there for us, but they aren't natural in there. They can do some of the things in there, and that's what Justin Hall is. I mean, he was at Las Vegas when I was up there, and there were 3 guys, and they all, looked pretty much the same. I mean, they were all 3 very good players, and I liked all 3 of them. I didn't know who was going to get cut, but I figured the one that didn't would be somebody that would be on our radar screen, and Justin was that guy. And I talked for Justin for a couple of months, and between he and his agent, trying to figure out what was the best thing to do, wait for another option with the NFL. Should I sign with the USFL team or wait it out? And finally, he decided to sign with us, and that was a big sign. His Ball State film is tremendous. I mean, he's making plays all over the place. He runs jet sweeps. He runs bubble screens. He runs, all the types of things that those players run, crossing routes, and then plus he's an excellent return man. So he's got that, run after catch ability. He's got the running instincts. He's got the quickness, and we're glad to have him because, again, that gives us a receiver that gives our wide receiver group a different look. And then Keke Chisholm, a San Angelo State transfer to Missouri for his last year, now gives us a 6'4" guy, and who can, you think of our games, and you think of all of the taller 6'2" wide receivers that make big catches down the field in our league last year. Adams, for one, for New Orleans.
Yes, that was the one that came to mind.
And so they're all over the league. And, Keke is not in the NFL because he's a step slow, but he's got everything else you would want. And so to add a 6'4" guy to our roster, to our wide receiver group, again, gives us another dynamic that we didn't have a year ago. And then Joshua Moore from Texas. We may have had some fast guys last year. I don't know if we had anybody as fast as Joshua.
He's fast.
And so, he gives us that ability down the field. And so I feel, we have 4 returning and we have 4 additions. I think we have 8 really quality players that will have a lot of competition between that position to see who plays. And we have more diversity in the group as to what they can do and what a defense is going to have to defend. I don't know if we did that to a defense last year. Hopefully this year we'll get a chance. And then the other new guy we didn't mention was Deontez Alexander. And he may be as talented as anybody. I know if you go on YouTube, you can see the catch he makes when he's in Detroit, the one-handed catch in the end zone, just diving. And, he was with the Seahawks, during camp this year, and just was an early cut in camp. But tremendous receiver. He's got all the measurables you would want. He's 6'1", 196, and ran 4.35 when he was at Franklin. So, again, there's another big guy that can run. And, a little bit untested. But, again, he's got the types of traits that NFL teams just keep. Let's give him another try. And Seattle's like that. Seattle is going to take a chance on anybody that's got the measurables that I just mentioned, like for Deontez. So, those 4 guys I think will make our wide receiver group a much better group than it was a year ago. And we had a good group last year. One of them still in the NFL. So,
yes,
I think we'll be better this year.
And that one still in the NFL even had an interception during the preseason playing safety.
No,
just an athlete.
Isaiah did good. And it was when I was at Las Vegas, got a chance to talk to him. I'm glad to see that he survived all year.
Yes. When the futures deals were being announced, the entire network, the USFL network, was going through all the futures deals looking for the USFL players. And he was one name that I was glad to see he got one. But it was almost like, man, I kind of wish he was with the Gamblers again. But I like what you're talking about. I agree with it, that it was more of a one-dimensional wide receiver room where now there's different layers to it. And a fun story about Keke Chisholm, my best friend in the world, I was the best man at his wedding. He played left tackle at Tarleton State, and they played San Angelo Central. And so when the Gamblers signed him, he texted me and he said, "Hey, man, I played against that guy." I said, "Really?" And he said, "Yeah, back in D2, that guy was a man among boys." And yes, I just thought that was so funny. I was like, okay, I feel about it.
He was pretty good in the SEC of Missouri too.
Yes, he was. Yes, he was. But so then another offensive person to talk about, TJ Pledger, who I almost think is kind of the same vein, the same thought process, that he's kind of a more scat back, where the running back room, until maybe Benny LeMay, was very downhill running, other than Dalen Dawkins, but he spent a lot of the time injured. So it was kind of a lot of hard-nosed running with Dubois Whaley and Mark Thompson downhill, and TJ Pledger adds another dimension to that. Is that what you're thinking, or am I completely off base?
Really, I was just trying to add another quality running back. Dalen was up in the air whether he was coming back or not, and decided, not to. And TJ, was at Arizona, and again, one of the running backs there that, okay, if they cut him, he's a guy that I'm going to be interested in with all the running backs that they had. And again, he catches a ball out of the backfield, which is important to an offense. He's got good vision, probably more along the lines of Benny LeMay as a running back. And so we didn't need to add another big power back. So he gives us, yes, scat back, but I mean, he can run the ball inside. He can catch it out of the backfield. He can do all the things that you want a running back to do, and he'll fight for playing time in that room for sure. If I hit it right. So, and again, he was in Arizona's camp this year, so another guy that we signed out of an NFL camp.
NFL intangibles. I like it, and I like that it sounds like I was not completely off base with it. So that makes me a little happy. And then someone that you didn't sign out of free agency, but you traded for, was Montel Kozar. And everybody wanted to talk about quarterbacks this offseason. It was up in the air if Clayton Thorson was going to come back. That didn't happen. What made you want to go within the league to get a quarterback, get Montel, instead of sign someone out of free agency and trade the playing rights to Jesse Lemonier? May he rest in peace.
We had a feeling Clayton wasn't going to come back because of the surgery. So we knew we had Kenji, and we knew we had Terry. Nobody knows about Terry Wilson. Terry Wilson's a really good player. He was in Dallas. He was in Dallas's mini camp, Denver's rookie mini camp a year ago, and then he signed with us. Was with us for the last 5 weeks. Very good player at Kentucky before he transferred to New Mexico. Kenji, before he hurt his hand, probably would have been playing maybe even sooner than he did. But then when he started playing at the end of the year after Clayton got hurt, led us to 2 wins. He can play better than he did, but he gave us some stability there, gave us the ability to win games. And everybody, looks at our team and wonders the same thing you are. Why didn't we go out and sign a big name quarterback? Our quarterback room isn't very good. We'll see.
That.
We'll
I promise
see.
I don't think
We'll see. But Montel was in a situation in Birmingham where he knew he wasn't going to play. Jamar Smith is a starter there, and then they've got the other guy, and so he was Alex, and they're both very talented. And Montel was third, and just kind of knew that's where he was. Well, David Beatty coached him at Kansas, and so David knew of him, and so through that, we kind of knew that Montel wanted out of Birmingham. We really didn't have a way to get him until one of the players that was on one of my NFL teams, Jesse Lemonier, was available, and we were full at the outside linebacker spot. I had already signed a bunch of players there, and so then that gave us some ammo to go after Montel, and we felt he was a good fit at that time for our offense, could do the things that we needed to do, and so we put that in motion. The Birmingham agreed to it because I think they wanted Montel to find a happy home and be happy too. So, it worked out for both. They wanted Jesse. They were short at that position. And we thought Montel was a good add to our quarterback room, make it very competitive. And it's, having a good athlete at the quarterback in spring leagues is a plus.
I
Those
agree.
guys make plays. Those guys, the athletes on the defensive side aren't as good as they are in the NFL. And so if you have a guy that can run around and make plays, um, you just look at our games a year ago when the quarterback was able to scramble out and make a key run for a first down, or uh, a longer run for a big play. Um, I think it's important to have some athletes at the quarterback position. That's what Montel gives us, and he's a good player in his own right. Good enough athlete to play wide receiver in Canada, but he wants to be a quarterback, and he'll be a quarterback. And that, I think, we'll have a room with really good competition there between the three of them. So that's how Montel became a part of our team.
The thing I like about it is that last season it was Clayton and Kenji, and they were two. I mean, both can throw the ball, but Kenji is kind of a more hybrid type of quarterback where he can run when he wants to, and he can run really well, but he can also sling it. He has a humongous arm. But they were two different kind of quarterbacks. Where now the quarterback room is three guys that all, if one goes down, the next guy he can run the same plays. It's the same type of quarterback, and I think that's, and like you said, having a running quarterback in a spring league is a huge plus. I think they are the quickest to be successful in a spring league when they come in. So I think it's fantastic. I love the move when you got Montel Cozart. Went and watched his tape back in college, and he's great. So I thought it was a great move.
Well, thanks. We'll see. And I know Eric's excited to get his hands on all three of them and see what they are, because he doesn't know them. He really doesn't.
Mm-hmm.
And so see how they fit, what he wants to do offensively. But I think they can fit in any offense. Kenji wants to sit in the pocket and throw the ball. He's not quick to get out of there and run. He has the ability to do it, and
Mm-hmm.
he's more dynamic when things are going fast, and he's just on the run trying to make plays. Some of his best moments in games were those type of moments. Some of his best moments in practice were that,
Yeah,
where
the
things
full
just break,
sprint.
where things just break down, and he's on his own, and somebody comes open, and he throws it to him. And
Mm-hmm.
Terry's the same type of guy. Terry has a really good. If you like Kenji's arm, you like Terry's arm. I mean, they both stand up there and throw the ball, and I guess the scouting gurus would say they spin it, pretty well. So
Terry actually posted some videos of him practicing throwing the ball, throwing some fades yesterday. That is the tightest spiral. I mean, it is a straight circle when it's moving to the
yeah.
corner. So I agree. I think he can throw a beautiful ball, but I love it. I think it's great. And I agree. Kenji, some of his best throws, I mean, even most accurate throws somehow, were when he was going completely horizontal at a full sprint because the pocket had broken down, and then he just somehow did it.
Mhm.
Uh, I think they're great. I think people sleep on them a lot. I don't necessarily know why. Kenji came in and won 2 of 3 games starting, and is the only quarterback in the USFL to have beat the Birmingham Stallions. So I just don't understand why people talk bad about the quarterback room, but that's
Well,
just
we
me.
have a lot. We have a lot to prove at that position. We
Mhm.
need to get better at it and perform better than we did a year ago, and I think we will.
Well, having Eric Price is pretty great because he literally ran camps just for quarterbacks. So
Mhm.
I think it'll be good. But the last free agent signing I want to talk about, just because he's a friend and I know he's going to watch the show because he watches them all, Brandon Brooks out of Regina College in Regina University in Canada, went and played for the Barcelona Dragons. What'd you like about him, Coach?
Oh boy. Um, as I said when we were getting ready for the NFL 2023 draft, the position that is hard to find is corners, because
Mm-hmm.
any corner that has any size at all and can run is in the NFL or on an NFL practice squad. And so that position, unless you want a 5'8" corner, um, are hard to find.
Mm-hmm.
And this is a very eclectic group of corners that were that
Yes.
were that were collected. And there were times I had to share the film with Andy or somebody else, just saying I wasn't off of my rocker, signing these guys from the European League, and guys with the where's I want to get this right. Where's Brandon? Started at Dixie College, then Riverside Community College, then Nevada, then Regina, and then
Everywhere.
to Barcelona. But He is 6'2", 194 pounds, and runs 4.52. Verified numbers.
Tallest corner in the room.
So, and his shuttle times for a guy that big had a 4.15 short shuttle and a 7.12 three cone. And those numbers mean something to me, being an NFL scout for 16 years. So, I'm used to looking at those numbers, and it means something to me. That means Brandon's a good athlete.
Mm-hmm.
And for whatever reason, he had to bounce around and finally found a footing up of Regina. And then Brandon is, let's see, he's a 2020 kid. So he's a COVID year guy, and the NFL wasn't getting around in 2020. And so there are a bunch of good athletes and good football players that weren't given the look by NFL teams that every other class has gotten. There were no rookie mini camps. There were roster cut from 90 to 80 to 70, no pro days. And so I think we have 15 or 20 players from the 2020 class on our team. And so Brandon is one of those guys that kind of got overlooked in the process. I think he had a friend that was playing over in the European League. And so he followed him over there. And you watch that film, and I know, the athletes aren't as good as they are in our league. But he is a dominant player. He is a playmaker. And that's another thing that kind of catches my eye as a guy that makes plays on the ball. And that's what I saw Brandon do. And at 6'2", 190, 4.52, I'm going to take a chance on that guy as opposed to, say, a 5'9" corner that maybe played at a bigger school, maybe has more accolades. I think Brett Maxey will enjoy walking into that room of corners, and they're all 6 foot, 6'1", 6'2".
Yes.
That's I think he'll like that. And Brandon is, that whole group, Malcolm Washington, Trey Hoskins. I mean, they've all have their stories, and yet they all have film that backs up the numbers that say they're a good athlete. So we'll find
Nazir
out.
Streeter.
I mean,
Top 10 on
Nazir too is
on ESPN.
Now Nazir is a different guy. Nazir is a nickelback. I mean, he's the 5'9" guy, but he's the 5'9" guy that's really quick, aggressive, and he fits that role. Dayon Lake, another one of those guys, as you said, has played nickel, has played corner, has played safety, he's played running back, and he has excelled at all of them. Plus, he's a gunner at BYU that nobody could block. And again, another 190-pounder that runs in the 4.4s. And again, so it's up to the defensive coaches to figure out where those guys fit and what they do. But I think there's some athletic ability there to work with. There's some traits to work with. And that's not knowing who our coaches were going to be. That's really all I could do, was just try and find athletes with traits, athletes that were productive, guys that wanted to play in the USFL. And a lot of these guys are hungry. They want to prove that they were overlooked, and if given a shot, they can play. And this is the next step, or the first step, in them getting a chance to play in the NFL. And if not the NFL, they're a good player for us. And that'll all get started here in a couple of weeks. And I'm anxious to see him on the field, because all I've seen are highlight tapes and talk to him on the phone. And they're great to talk to. I mean, I've had 45-minute conversations with them, just talking about their background. And you fall in love with the story a little bit. And so I hope I didn't fall for that too much. And I tried not to. That's why I sent the film to some other people to kind of pull me off the ledge, to say, hey, am I seeing what I think I'm seeing? And for the most part, they backed me up. And that's why, a lot of these guys are signed, because really coming back, Jeremiah Johnson is the only corner coming back. So all the other guys are new. And then at safety, you've got Darius, Manny Bunch, and Andrew. And so we added a couple guys there, and then we added a couple nickel corners. If we made a mistake last year, we came into camp with only 8 defensive backs. We only had 45 on the roster. So, and when you're playing 5 most of the time, We had some hamstrings get tired, get pulled, and so now we're down to 7, and that just puts a lot of stress and strain on the legs. So that was another thing I tried to do this year was add, enough players in the secondary to where if we're playing 5, we can be too deep. And if somebody goes down with a hamstring injury or any type of injury, we have enough bodies to cover it, and we don't get tired legs and wear guys out and don't get the production that we could. Because that was one reason I think we got off to a slow start last year is we never had the same 5 guys in the secondary, and we were just coming back from being having a couple of hamstring injuries there early in the year and just didn't get the start that we needed. Once we got healthy at the end of the year, our secondary was playing really well. But so hopefully there are enough bodies there and enough athletic ability that Chris and Brett can mold them into a pretty good group.
I agree. I love that you said all of them are hungry. That's probably the reason I love this league the most is that it's all players who really love the game of football. And I absolutely love that. And you're right. This is a taller corner room than last year. When you look at the Jamar Smiths or Jamar Summers, the Will Likeleys, this is just literally a head above
Right.
that room, but very exciting.
It's also a room that is less experienced and
Mhm.
more hungry. Jamar and Will, and they had been around for a couple
Mhm.
of years. They'd been in the CFL. They'd been in the spring leagues before, and so this group, a lot of them haven't experienced that. Some of them the CFL, but um, it's a group hungry to show what they can do, and time will tell.
Well, you said you're anxious to see them. I am as well, but I believe that they're going to do well. So I don't think we're just seeing things, Coach. No worries. But the last thing I wanted to talk to you about, and that I know everybody is incredibly interested about, is that the new head coach, Curtis Johnson, Super Bowl winner, national championship winner. What has it been like transitioning from Kevin Sumlin to Curtis Johnson and doing that less than a week before the draft?
Um, Curtis came in with his nose to the grindstone. He wants to do this right. He wants to do it well. Um, he's got a lot of experience with the Saints. He's got experience as a head coach, at Tulane,
Mhm.
and so he's got a lot of knowledge and background to put into the job. We had a staff meeting last week to go over schedules, and shoot, we weren't going over schedules until we got to camp a year ago. So he seems to be very organized. He has a plan. Uh, he's got an offensive staff with Eric that he's worked with before, and so
Mhm.
they know what they want to do on offense. He knows Chris Wilson, and Chris has a plan, and they're putting that into place. So the coaches are doing that right now. And as far as the 2023 draft, I know Curtis had so much to do just getting his feet on the ground and hadn't had a chance to really look at any of these players. Um, I very quickly went over what our strategy was going to be and what we were going to do, and really none of these guys were going to affect our roster this year. But there were more guys that were going to help us a year down the road. So between Andy and I, we handled most of that ourselves. As I said, once the coach Chris got here a little bit earlier, so between Chris and Brett and Andy, I was sending them film just to get their feedback. Um, so that was basically handled with trying not to have Curtis stress about that when he had so many other things. Now, once we get into the season, I fully expect him to be as wired into the personnel moves that we make as he is into what's going on offensively, defensively, and getting the schedule and getting everything right for the players. He's already reached out to all of our players on Teamworks. He wanted to do that right away. I know he's talked to some
Yeah.
of them in person on the phone, trying to get to know them as best he can. Uh, he, in the conversations I had, seems to have the players' best interests at heart. And yet he knows we were 3-7 last year, and there's a reason we were 3-7, and he thinks he can make the difference and make us better than we were. And I fully expect that he can, and the players are going to hear that message. And you know, it was a good change. You know, Kevin Kevin had a good year here and found another opportunity that he wanted to pursue. And so Curtis was more than willing to step in, and he's going to do a great job.
You got me excited, Coach. Especially talking about 3-7 last year. He thinks he can be the difference. I think so too, and it's great to hear you saying that. I'm very excited. I also thought it was serendipitous that he came in to a staff with his old offensive coordinator, and he didn't even know it. When I was talking to Eric Price the other day, he said that he realized he hadn't ever mentioned it to Curtis Johnson when he had talked to him in the weeks prior. And then when Curtis Johnson came in, he was surprised to learn that Eric was on the staff and that he already had his offensive coordinator. So I thought that was just really cool how things fall into place like that, and how, again, I'm constantly reminded how small the football world is. So I just thought that was a cool
one other
story.
thing about Curtis too is, he took the job. Most of our coaching staff was full,
Mhm.
and he kept all of those guys that were hired and had signed contracts. He kept them on, and he didn't have to do that. But he took the job knowing that, and he's working with the guys. And then he was able. There were 3 positions that were open that he filled with people, with coaches that he knew. He knew Eric, so that was a bonus. But
Mhm.
no, it's been real positive. But it's only been 2 weeks. It seems like it's been longer than that because we've accomplished a lot, and we're trying to stay ahead of the game. That's for sure. We'll hit Memphis with our feet running on the ground, and we're ready to go.
Well, I'm very excited for that. I found out today it's 100%. I will be there at game 1, and I cannot wait to see
Good.
all the work that you did this offseason come together and be on that field for the first time together in a game setting. Very, very,
Yeah.
very excited and a little anxious, just like you, to see it and see how it is.
Yeah.
So, you know, Andy said you are the hardest working man in football. And I can't help but agree, especially after hearing all this stuff behind the scenes that you do. It's wild, coach. I don't
Well,
know how you do it.
it's working hard and working smart. I think go hand in hand. I'm not going to sit around here and watch a lot of film on guys that I don't think are going to help us. I wasn't going to chase 3,000 resumes to try and find 10 guys I'm going to pick. Like I started with, I was going to take guys that I knew something about. The guy from Colorado, Brady, 2 coaches had worked with him and they loved him. I would rather take a chance on that guy instead of reading some resume about a guy that I know nothing about and have never seen and draft him. So I don't know if I'm the hardest worker. I hope I'm one of the smartest workers because I still want to play golf. And I'm not going to sit by a computer for 8 hours a day um, at my age and not have some enjoyment. Now you're taking me away from my granddaughter tonight, and I'll
I
remember
apologize for
that.
that.
No, I'm just kidding. But I think there's such a thing as working smart, and that's what I try and do. Again, trying to put the best team together that I can, and hopefully, yeah, I'll miss some guys, but I've always been told by the people I worked with, it's not who you miss, it's who you get. That's the important thing. And so we'll see the fruits of my labor here in a couple weeks, and see because this this spring league was. I mean, this was the first. This is the first time we did this in a
Mhm.
spring league. We actually had a team that part of it was going to be back. We're going to lose some guys to the NFL. We had a new league coming in. We lost some guys to that, and agents didn't know what to expect. Free agents didn't know what to expect. As general managers of the team, we knew we could, get our roster up to 70, 75 if we wanted to, and then at the start of the year have to start, paring it down to get to 58 where we're at now. But it was a fun process. Could I have watched more guys to make sure I got exactly right? Probably, but I like the guys I got, or I like the players that are on our team. I didn't get them. We signed them, and they're part of the Houston Gamblers now. And it's just it was a fun process, and now we'll just see how it looks come the 16th, and we get on the field on the 20th. So
I like the guys you got too, Coach, and I think you definitely have earned, just some rounds of golf. And I mentioned it before, but I definitely would be willing to drive up there. And especially now that I've taken away part of a night with your granddaughter, I will buy a round of golf for you and go play and hopefully not slow you down too much. But
yeah,
I'd
all
love
right.
to do it.
I got too much to do around home the next 2 weeks, so I'm
Fair.
not going to be out there very much anymore. So.
Well, I hope you got a lot in while you had the chance, and I hope you are ready to go to Memphis and excited to see what Tennessee has to offer. Have you gotten a place yet? You figured all that out? You're ready?
Oh yeah, I'm in the Memphis Hilton. All set.
Nice. There you go. I know what it's like to live in a hotel. Being in the Army, I know what it's like to be in a hotel for months at a time.
Yeah.
You get a little stir crazy, but I think being a football coach would be a little different than what I was in. But I'm very excited, Coach. Thank you so much for coming
You're
on.
welcome.
I absolutely loved it. I mentioned in my tweet earlier, personally, you are my favorite GM in the league. And that's not just because I'm a Gamblers fan. I love the way you do it. I love the way, like, learning about the behind the scenes and the thought process behind the picks and behind the draft, behind all of it. So thank you so much for coming on, letting us peek behind the veil for a little bit and see how it is, what you're doing, and go Gamblers, Coach.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Thanks.
All right. Well, unless you have a message to Gamblers fans real quick, that is all I got for you, Coach.
Yeah, just more Gambler fans, the better. And follow Ace here because he's got he knows what's going on, and he'll give you the correct information. And I know our players love talking to him, and he'll give you the straight scoop. I know that. So he works at it hard.
Well, I really appreciate that, Coach. Sometimes this job is a little thankless, and hearing things like that really makes it worth it. So I really appreciate you. Thank you, Coach.
You're welcome.
All right. And to everybody out there, thank you so much for watching. This has been Gamblers Table Talk with Ace. I'm Ace, joined by Gamblers GM Bob Morris, the hardest working man in football. He won't say that, but he is. Y'all have a great night.
Bye.
I'm in the big leagues, told her don't miss me. Ballin' like Houston, ayy, feeling like Whitney. I need a